Have you ever wondered why you keep choosing the same man, only with a different name and a slightly different face, the same pattern disguised as love? You tell yourself this time it will be different, but it never really is. He says the right things at first, touches the right wounds, makes you feel seen just long enough for you to offer him everything you never gave yourself. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And maybe that's the truth we fear the most. It's not fate. It's not bad luck. It's the parts of you you refuse to look at, the shadow that pulls you back to the same hurt again and again, until you finally stop running and listen. Most people think shadow work is some dark, mystical thing, but sometimes it's as simple as asking, why do I crave the one who can't love me back? Why do I feel alive in the arms of someone who leaves me empty? Maybe you've asked yourself that. Maybe tonight, you're lying awake next to someone who doesn't even see you, and your soul is whispering, "Why am I still here?" Listen until the end, because the answer isn't out there, in him, it's in you. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's the map back to the part of you you keep abandoning just to feel wanted. And when you finally see it, really see it, you'll stop calling it love when it's only a wound dressed up in romance. So if you're ready to know why you keep choosing the wrong man, stay. This is not just a story about him, it's a story about you, and the shadow you've been running from for far too long. She never meant to keep choosing men who made her question her worth. No one ever does. But there she was, looking back at a lifetime of nights where she lay awake next to a man whose silence felt louder than his words. It always started the same way, the rush, the butterflies, the spark that felt like fate. He would see her, or so she thought. He would touch the places she buried, promise to protect what she was too tired to guard herself. And every time, she'd whisper to her shadow, maybe this time it's different, but it never was. You see, the shadow loves repetition. It feeds on the familiar, even when the familiar tastes like poison. Carl Jung said, "The shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door, whose painful constriction no one is spared who goes down to the deep well." She didn't know she was standing at that door every time she let him in. She thought she was choosing love, but the truth is, she was choosing her wound, again and again. Not because she wanted to hurt, but because somewhere in her, hurt felt like home. No one teaches a woman how to recognize the voice of her shadow when it sounds like longing, when he doesn't call back, when he disappears. When he loves just enough to keep her starving, she mistakes that ache for passion. She tells herself it means he's worth fighting for. But the fight was never about him. It was a battle inside her, with the parts she didn't want to face, the parts that whispered, "You're not enough unless someone needs you. You're not worthy unless you're chosen, even if you're only half chosen." The shadow is cunning that way. It paints our deepest wounds in colors we call romance. It convinces us that love must cost our peace, our dignity, our sleep. And she believed it for so long because it's what she saw. Maybe her mother did the same. Maybe every woman before her called the craving devotion, loyalty, sacrifice, when really it was just pain echoing through generations, wearing a different face each time. She learned to romanticize the scraps, to beg for crumbs and call it a meal, to wait by the phone, to check for messages that never came. She'd get just enough to stay, but never enough to feel safe. And still, when it ended, she'd mourn him as if he was the last chance at something real. But deep down, there was always a whisper she ignored. Was he ever really yours? Or was he just the shape your shadow needed to keep you circling the same wound? If you told her back then that the ache she felt was her own reflection, she would have laughed. She would have called it bad luck, or bad men, or bad timing. Anything but the truth that part of her craved what hurt, because pain was familiar, predictable, easier than facing the terror of wholeness. Wholeness meant standing alone. Wholeness meant no one to blame. Wholeness meant turning the light on in places she'd kept locked for years. So she kept choosing him. Different names, different eyes, same emptiness, same pattern. Until one day, maybe today, she started to ask, what if it was never about them at all? What if the only thing I keep choosing is my shadow? And that question is where everything changes. Because the moment she stops blaming fate, stops pretending love is just bad luck, she stands at the door. Jung spoke of the tight passage where her old self can't squeeze through, carrying all her illusions. Maybe that's why this hurts so much. Maybe that's why she still hesitates to open the door. But what waits on the other side isn't another man to save her. It's the part of her that no longer needs saving. And maybe, just maybe, she's ready to meet that woman now. And maybe that's where the real story begins. She used to think she was just unlucky in love. Friends told her she was too soft, too forgiving. Her mother said she needed to stop dreaming. The truth was never about luck, it was about blindness. Blind to her shadow, blind to the patterns that felt like fate because they were familiar, blind to the voice inside that whispered, "If you don't bleed for it, it's not real." She didn't know that was the shadow talking. She didn't know how deep it ran, how far back it reached. Some nights, she'd stand in the bathroom, staring at her reflection like it was a stranger, mascara smudged, heart racing from another fight, another silence. She'd whisper, "Why do I always end up here?" But the answer was too heavy to hold, so she blamed him, or the one before him, or the next one. She told herself men were cowards, or liars, or both, and sometimes they were. But sometimes they were just mirrors, reflecting the wound she didn't want to see. Carl Jung once said, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life." Maybe that's what he meant. She wasn't just meeting him, she was meeting herself, dressed up as longing, as chemistry, as the rush of something forbidden. And every time it ended, she promised herself, never again. But the next man who spoke the right words, who touched the emptiness in just the right way, she opened the door like she'd never been hurt before. The shadow is cunning like that. It doesn't come to ruin you. It comes to teach you what you're still clinging to. For her, it was the story that she was only worthy if someone else chose her, no matter how poorly they held her. She kept her worth on the auction block, waiting for the highest bidder, never realizing that real love doesn't demand you sell pieces of your soul for scraps of attention. She thought distance would save her. Maybe if I date someone different, maybe if I move, maybe if I disappear, they won't find me. But the shadow doesn't live in cities or phone numbers or dating apps. It lives under her skin. It waits in the dark until she's tired, lonely, or hopeful enough to bargain with her own peace. And when it whispers, "You're too much to be fully loved," she believes it until she doesn't. This isn't a story about blaming herself. She's done enough of that for a lifetime. It's a story about finally seeing the trap for what it is, a pattern she can name, and what we name, we can change. But change is terrifying. To change means she has to sit alone long enough to feel the parts of her that ache without him, the parts she used to stuff down with phone calls and apologies and begging him to stay. To change means she has to break up with the version of herself that was addicted to half-love. Some nights, the silence of being alone feels like punishment. She tells herself, "At least when he was here, I didn't feel so invisible." But that's the lie. He didn't see her, not really. He saw a woman who would bend until she broke. He saw the wound, not the woman, and when he was gone, the wound was all she thought she had left. But the shadow holds more than just the wound. It holds the truth too. The truth that real love doesn't feel like starvation. The truth that being alone isn't failure, it's freedom, if she lets it be. It's the fortress she builds, not to keep love out, but to keep herself in, whole, unbroken, waiting for no one to rescue her. Maybe this is what the shadow has been trying to say all along. Stop waiting for someone to choose you. Stop giving your power to the same emptiness wrapped in a different body. Stand still, look in the mirror, see who's really there. Because when she does, she'll find something the wrong man could never give her herself. And maybe that's the beginning of a new kind of love story. One that doesn't start with a promise from him, but with a vow to herself. She never realized how many mirrors she'd been standing in front of all her life. Each man a reflection, some clearer than others, some so distorted she mistook her wounds for his love. But they all showed her the same thing, the parts she still refused to see, the parts that longed for just a sliver of kindness, a moment of warmth, a promise that maybe this time she wouldn't be left behind. Carl Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But what happens when you keep mixing the same old chemicals? What happens when she shows up in every relationship carrying the same ache, the same hunger, the same invisible sign that says, "Take what you want from me, I won't stop you"? No one teaches a woman how to clean her mirror before she tries to reflect someone else. She thinks love will heal her, but love only exposes what's still raw. And so she blames him when he leaves, when he lies, when he drifts into silence, never realizing he was only playing the role her shadow wrote long ago, a man who disappears so she can keep proving she's not enough. She used to beg for answers. Why did he change? Why did he love me, then vanish? But deep down, the real question was harder. Why did I need him to complete me? Why did my soul pick him when my gut whispered he will never stay? We don't fall for who's good for us, we fall for who feels familiar. And familiar isn't always safe. Sometimes it's chaos dressed up as passion. Sometimes it's abandonment wearing the mask of romance. Sometimes it's her father's silence echoing through a lover's cold shoulder. And in that echo she feels alive because pain was the first language her heart learned to speak. If you told her this years ago, she'd say you were wrong. She'd say she loved too hard, too honestly. But there's a difference between loving deeply and bleeding for someone who never brings a bandage. There's a difference between vulnerability and self-sacrifice. She knows that now, or at least she's starting to learn. The mirror doesn't lie. The mirror says, look closer. The mirror says, every wound you keep hidden will pick your lovers for you. And so she does the hardest thing. She sits with her reflection, no man to distract her, no phone to promise she's wanted, just her and the stories she keeps telling herself about why she isn't whole. Some nights, the loneliness screams louder than any lover's betrayal. Some nights, she wants to run back to him, any him, just to feel that brief hit of being needed. But then she remembers, needing is not loving, and real love doesn't come from emptiness, it comes from overflow, but you can't overflow when you're leaking from the same old wound. Shadow work is a brutal teacher. It doesn't stroke your hair and tell you it's all someone else's fault. It holds up the mirror and says, this is you, this is what you've hidden. This is what keeps calling the same ghosts back into your bed. And yet, there's power in seeing it. There's power in whispering, no more. She doesn't have to keep playing the role of the woman who's always left, always longing, always hoping he'll finally love her enough to make her feel complete. She can rewrite it, but rewriting means she has to stand in front of the mirror, eyes wide open, hands steady, voice clear, I choose me now. And that choice will terrify the parts of her that crave the familiar, the parts that think solitude is punishment instead of sanctuary. But maybe, just maybe, if she stays with her reflection long enough, she'll see not the wound, but the woman, the one who survived, the one who knows now that real love doesn't ask her to abandon herself. And maybe that's why the mirror hurts, because it doesn't show the fantasy, it shows the truth. And the truth is, she's always had the power to stop choosing the wrong man. She just had to stop believing she needed him to see her worth. And maybe, next time she looks in the mirror, she'll see not just her shadow, but her sanctuary, waiting to be claimed. She never thought she'd build a fortress around her heart. She always told herself she was open, that she was ready for love, that if the right man came along, she would meet him at the gate with arms wide. But the truth is, her gates were rusted shut long before she ever knew they existed. She built that fortress brick by brick, heartbreak by heartbreak, betrayal by betrayal. Each goodbye laid a new stone, each lie poured fresh concrete. Carl Jung wrote, "The walls we build around us to keep sadness out also keep out the joy." She knows that now. The fortress isn't just a boundary, it's a prison when you forget who it was meant to protect. Once, it felt safe to keep everyone at a distance. If no one got too close, no one could hurt her. But loneliness crept in anyway, finding the cracks in the mortar, whispering through the walls at night. Is this really freedom, or just another cage? Still, the fortress kept the wrong man out, didn't it? Or so she thought. But the wrong man doesn't need a front door. He finds the side gate left open by old insecurities. He scales the walls when she's tired. He comes in through the window of her need to be seen, and once inside, he convinces her to tear down her fortress for him, all while hiding the matches behind his back. So she learned to guard the wrong parts. She closed herself off to the ones who wanted to stay, but she left secret passages for the ones who fed her shadow. The ones who felt like chaos, like danger, like the thrill she mistook for passion. They slipped past her defenses not because they were stronger than her fortress, but because they were exactly what her shadow craved. And when they left, they took another piece of her wall with them. Now, she stands in the middle of these crumbling walls, asking herself, what was I really protecting? It wasn't her heart, it was her illusion. The illusion that she could stay soft and open, and yet be untouched. But the fortress was never meant to keep her isolated. It was meant to keep her whole, to remind her that not everyone deserves an invitation in. She understands now. The fortress must stand, but not for hiding, for choosing. She doesn't need to keep love out. She needs to keep the wrong kind of love from tearing her apart again. Love that demands she shrink. Love that calls her too much, too emotional, too difficult until she forgets she's enough. When she thinks of all the nights she let someone break in just because he knew how to knock at her weakest hour, she feels a flicker of anger, but more than anger, she feels grief. Grief for the girl who didn't know how to guard herself. Grief for the woman who confused being needed with being loved. Grief for the version of her who thought that tearing down her fortress for the wrong man was proof she could be saved. But this grief isn't here to drown her, it's here to cleanse her. It's the first drop of rain on stone walls that have waited too long for softness, because a fortress can be both strong and tender. It can be a sanctuary when she remembers she is its keeper, not its prisoner. Now, when someone knocks, she doesn't rush to swing the doors open just because he says the right words. She stands at her gate, listening, watching. She asks herself, does he come empty-handed, expecting her to feed his hunger with her soul? Or does he come whole, carrying his own truth, ready to meet her as she is, no less, no more? This is how she keeps the fortress sacred. This is how she turns her walls into a sanctuary instead of a tomb. She stops apologizing for the door she keeps closed to what drains her. She stops feeling guilty for asking a lover to stand outside until he proves he won't burn the place down just to warm his own hands. The shadow wanted her to believe that the fortress was loneliness. But now she sees it's the cradle of her becoming. It's where she learns that solitude is not the absence of love, it's the space where real love finds her, if it ever comes. And if it doesn't, she is still whole within these walls she built, not to keep the world out, but to keep herself in. And maybe, just maybe, when the right man appears, if he ever does, he won't ask her to tear these walls down. He'll stand at her gate, unafraid, and whisper, I see you, fortress and all. And maybe that's what her shadow has been waiting for all along. Some nights she still wonders what it would feel like to let someone in, really in, to open the gate of her fortress, without fear that the first hands reaching for her will come with fire hidden behind a sweet smile. She knows now the fortress isn't the problem, it's the invitations she once sent to men who never deserved the keys. And so she stands within her walls, finally seeing what this space truly is. Not a prison, but a sanctuary. Carl Jung wrote, solitude is for me a fount of healing which makes my life worth living. She didn't understand that once. She thought solitude was proof she was unwanted, unchosen, forgotten. She let the silence convince her she was unlovable. But the silence isn't empty, not anymore. It's honest. It's hers. It's the sound of a soul remembering how to breathe without waiting for permission. In her sanctuary, she's begun to see what the mirror tried to show her all along. The wrong man never lied about who he was, not really. He only reflected the pieces of her that were still unhealed. The ache that begged for scraps because she didn't know how to feed herself the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions. The wound that believed chaos was excitement, that heartbreak was proof of devotion. Now, in the quiet, she listens to the ghosts of her old stories, the ones that say a woman alone is a woman abandoned. The ones that say she should open her gates to anyone who promises warmth, even if the warmth burns her to ash. But these stories lose their power when she sits in the sanctuary of her own truth. She understands now that real love, if it comes, will not bang on her walls at midnight, demanding to be let in. It will wait at the gate with patience. It will not climb over or sneak through the side door. It will not force her to prove she's worthy by tearing herself apart. Real love doesn't feed on the hunger in her shadow. It flows where there is wholeness, where two people meet not as savior and saved, but as reflections of each other's work, each other's becoming. There were nights she used to dream of him, the man who would see every wound and kiss them all shut. But now she sees the danger in that fantasy. The man who claims he can fix her is just another ghost wearing a mask. The truth is, her wounds were never his to heal. They are her teachers, her warnings, her roots. They keep her grounded in the reality that she is not half a person waiting for completion. She is a woman who has learned to keep the promises she once begged others to make for her. In this sanctuary, she finds the courage to love herself fiercely enough to stay alone rather than bargain with her soul for a love that shrinks her. She knows now that half love is not better than no love at all, that there is a freedom in being whole, even if the world calls her fortress cold or distant. They don't see the warmth inside the warmth she's building with her own hands. Sometimes she catches her reflection in the mirror, the same mirror that once only showed her shame and longing. Now it shows her something else, a softness that doesn't come from desperation but from peace. A calm that comes not because there's no desire left in her, but because desire no longer rules her. She no longer confuses emptiness with hunger. She knows the difference now. The shadow still whispers, of course. It asks, what if no one comes? What if you grow old behind these walls, untouched, unseen? And she smiles at that voice because she knows the difference between solitude and isolation. She knows that love is not something you beg for at the edge of your fortress. It's something that arrives when you're not guarding yourself out of fear, but out of reverence for the sacred space you've become. Maybe the world will keep telling her she's too much, too picky, too complicated to love. But the mirror and the sanctuary echo back a different story. That the woman who stands alone in her truth is the most dangerous kind. Dangerous not because she's cruel, but because she refuses to settle for anything that asks her to dim her light. If the right man ever finds his way to her gate, he won't ask her to become small for his comfort. He won't fear her fortress. He'll see her sanctuary and understand it for what it is, the home she built for herself by herself, and he will stand there, not demanding entry, but offering his own sanctuary in return. And maybe, just maybe, when that day comes, she will open the gate, not because she needs him to rescue her, but because she knows she no longer needs rescuing at all. And that is where the shadow starts to soften, where the old patterns begin to lose their power because a woman who guards her sanctuary has already chosen herself. There's a moment, quiet but unmistakable, when she realizes she doesn't need to keep proving she's worthy of love. A moment when the hunger softens, the ache quiets, and her shadow, once the cruel trickster, becomes her oldest teacher. Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that is what she has done, piece by piece, night by night, heartbreak by heartbreak. She used to think healing meant she would never want again, that wholeness would erase the ache for connection. But she knows now that isn't true. She still wants to be held. She still wants to be seen, chosen, loved. The difference is, she no longer wants it at the cost of herself. She no longer bleeds for a love that only takes. She no longer calls betrayal, passion, or emptiness romance. This is individuation, not a perfect state, not a final destination, but a quiet agreement with her soul to stop abandoning herself. It's the soft rebellion of a woman who chooses to stand in her shadow and her light, refusing to divide herself to fit someone's small idea of love. It's what happens when she turns the mirror outward and inward at once, seeing herself and what she used to settle for, both with eyes wide open. Some days, the loneliness still taps at her window. Some nights, the old ghosts knock at the gate, promising one more chance to play the same game in a new disguise. But she knows how to listen now. She knows how to stand in her fortress, her sanctuary, her whole self, and say, no more. No more men who vanish when the truth gets heavy. No more lovers who come empty, asking her to fill them with the pieces she works so hard to reclaim. No more half-love that drains the marrow of her bones. No more pretending she's not enough, just so someone else can feel bigger beside her. She doesn't stand there as a woman hardened by bitterness. She stands there as a woman softened by truth. There's a difference. Bitterness says, I will never trust again. Truth says, I trust myself enough to wait, and if waiting means years of quiet nights, if it means growing old behind her walls, she knows now that her company is enough. The fortress does not keep her locked away. It keeps her safe until love shows up willing to do the same work she did. And if it never comes, so be it. She would rather grow roots in her sanctuary than be uprooted by another lie called love. Sometimes, When she thinks of the girl she used to be, the one who begged for scraps, who thought the right man would fix the emptiness, she wants to wrap her in her arms, whisper, "You never needed saving." But she can't go back and change the nights she cried herself to sleep, or the mornings she waited for messages that never came. She can only carry those stories as reminders that the darkness didn't break her. It showed her the way back to herself. This is what the shadow teaches when you stop running from it. It isn't the enemy, it's the doorway. It's the part of her that holds the secrets she was too afraid to hear, that she was never too much, that her tears didn't make her weak, that wanting to be loved was never the problem. It was mistaking crumbs for a feast that starved her for so long. Now, when she looks in the mirror, she sees the woman she fought so hard to become. She sees the fortress, not as a wall to keep the world out, but as proof that she knows her worth. She sees the sanctuary not as a punishment for being alone, but as the garden she tends with her own hands. And she sees the shadow not as a monster, but as an old friend that whispers, "I'm still here. I always will be. But you are free to choose differently now." If the right man ever comes, he won't be the savior she once prayed for. He'll be a mirror too, but this time he'll reflect the work she's done, the strength she carries, the softness she protects. And if he never comes, she's no longer waiting for him to tell her who she is. She is her own answer now. She is the love story that no man can write for her. And that, in the end, is what makes her dangerous, not because she's unapproachable, but because she will never again give herself away for anything less than everything. So if this story felt like yours, if you've looked at your own shadow and wondered why you keep choosing what hurts, maybe it's time to choose something else. Maybe it's time to choose you. And if these words touched a quiet place inside you that you've been too afraid to visit alone, share them. Not because you need to shout your pain, but because somewhere out there, another woman is standing at her gate, wondering if her fortress is a cage or a sanctuary. Maybe she needs to hear what you just remembered, that within these walls she is already whole.